Actually, in China's metaphysical system, Feng Shui is the closest thing to science. The term Feng Shui literally translates to wind and water. So originally, it was about exploring how to make human living environments more comfortable and prevent disasters. You might even notice that some universities in China have Feng Shui as an elective course in their architecture departments. Of course, here we're only discussing the metaphysical side. If you liked today's story, let me know. There might be a second episode. And if you're interested in any aspects of China's mysterious culture, feel free to let me know. Remember, every Saturday night, we'll meet right here. When I was in first grade, we moved into a new place. It was an old apartment building, and the rooms weren't very big. So our parents rented 3 connected rooms, and the window of the middle room was facing the T-junction. When my parents went to check out the place, they were very satisfied. But an old neighbor warned us not to live there. He said houses like that, facing the T-junction, would attract a lot of 煞气, a strong negative energy, then would bring misfortune to us. But my parents didn't believe in that stuff, so they brushed it off and quickly signed the lease. However, that's when my nightmare started. At first, we turned the middle room into our bedroom. I've always been a sickly kid and have frequent encounters with ghosts. So after we slept into that room, things got worse. Every night, as soon as I fell asleep, I'd feel this overwhelming fear for no reason. It was like there was a voice in my head telling me that if I kept sleeping, I'd never wake up again. Then, this intense survival instinct would kick in, and I'd wake up only to slowly fall asleep again and then wake up again. This cycle kept repeating, and it just made my health worse. Eventually, I told my parents about it, and we moved to the room next door, turning the middle room into a living room. But even then, strange things didn't stop. One time, my mom and her friends were playing mahjong in that room, and suddenly, the ceiling began to crumble, with chunks of cement falling down. Everyone panicked and ran out. Sure enough, not long after, we heard a loud crash, and the sofa and table were smashed, with a huge hole in them. However, when we looked up at the ceiling, we discovered that the debris had formed the shape of a baby lying on his stomach. Seeing this, one of the neighbors instantly turned pale. She told us that a young pregnant woman had once lived in that room, but unfortunately, something happened and she miscarried. When my parents heard that, they were shocked. Even though they didn't really believe in superstition, this was just too much of a coincidence. It made us think of that old neighbor's warning, and we decided to move. Not long after, we ended up moving to the building next door, and the old apartment was quickly rented out again. Over time, I learned more about his past, and it really wasn't a good place to live. The new tenant's son was my classmate. One day, he wasn't at school, so I asked why. He had red eyes and said his dad had suddenly become paralyzed, with no signs or explanation. They went to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. Not long after, maybe they heard something about the house, they moved out. And guess what? The day they left, his dad made a miraculous recovery. This got people talking, and soon, it brought up the haunting memories of the cursed house. Turns out, many years ago, that place used to be an empty land. A couple bought it, and they built a small apartment complex there. During the construction, some people advised them to avoid building on land that faces a T-junction, saying it was bad feng shui and would bring bad luck, but the couple didn't listen. Once the place was built, they moved in as the first tenants. However, they didn't expect disaster to hit like a domino effect. First, they couldn't have kids. They tried everything, drinking Chinese medicine, undergoing IVF, but nothing worked. So finally, they adopted a baby girl. But not long after, the man suddenly became paralyzed, still with no clear reason. Then his mother died, followed by the man passing away at just 45. Less than a year later, his wife also died. So within 2 years, the whole family was gone, leaving only the adopted girl behind. This terrified the tenants, and they all moved out. People believed the place was cursed due to bad feng shui. Eventually, the girl grew up with relatives, inherited the apartment and sold it off before getting married and moving away. Then, the apartment was rented out again. But here's the weird part. In our building, all the tenants had boys. Every single one, no exception. In the other building, the one that faced the T-junction, all the tenants had girls. It's pretty mind-blowing. That's when I really started to believe Feng Shui can have a huge impact on people's lives. In Feng Shui, it's really frowned upon to have a house directly facing a road intersection. The main issue is that intersections have a higher chance of traffic accidents, which will gather more wandering spirits. Plus, the shape of the intersection is like a pair of scissors, almost as if it is trying to cut the house in half. Those of you who know a bit about Chinese culture also understand that we value harmony, and sharp, pointy shapes are seen as bad energy. It's believed that this can create an unstable atmosphere, leading to things like financial loss or health problems. Of course, there are ways to fix it, like placing a screen at the corner or hanging a bagua mirror to block or reflect that negative energy. But in my experience, the main reason I wouldn't recommend living near an intersection is the noise. It's just way too loud. I have an aunt who lives on the outskirts of the city. Her husband was a village chief, so after saving up some money, he bought a large piece of land and built a big house at the end of the road. The house was huge, with intricately carved iron gate. Looked really impressive. They lived there for over 10 years without any problems, until one day, a passing nun came by asking for some water. After chatting for a while, she turned to my uncle and said, "Why did you build your yang house on top of a yin house?" The yin house is basically a burial site. The nun was implying that there was a tomb beneath their house. According to Feng Shui, this is a huge taboo because it can seriously affect the luck of the living. Hearing her words, Uncle was shocked and said, "How could that be? I grew up here. I know exactly where the graveyard is." Soon after that, a heavy rainstorm hit our area. The rain softened the soil, and one night, a deep pit about a meter wide suddenly appeared in the uncle's house. At that point, my aunt remembered what the nun had said, and she started to feel like something serious was going on. Then, the family quickly built another house in the yard to move into. Thinking about it now, it seems a bit unbelievable. Feng Shui affects the luck of the whole area, not just by moving a few meters away. The family should have just left the place altogether. Soon enough, the new house was built, but not long after, the uncle passed away, and the house was left to his eldest son. The son then built a storage house in front of the yard and dug 2 wine cellars to start a small wine factory. But the business failed pretty quickly. Afterward, he moved into the house with his mother. This man had a weird hobby. He loved eating meat, but only fresh, live meat. So to satisfy his craving, he set up a power pole in the middle of the yard, hooked it up to high voltage electricity, and used it to stun his animals before slaughtering them to eat. He did this a lot, but no one in the village thought anything was wrong. Later, the man went to work in the city and, before leaving, sold the house cheaply to his younger brother. This younger brother wasn't as tough as he was. He was a quiet, gentle man who always treated people politely. But then, something shocking happened. He killed his wife and son one night and even cut off their heads. We were all shocked. When the police caught him and questioned why, he said, "That night, someone kept telling me to kill her. Just kill her." But whether it really happened or if he was just making excuses for his actions, we'll never know. But many villagers believe that the house, being built on top of a yin house, had messed with his mind. After the man was arrested, the court told the family they had to sell the house to cover the civil compensation, but no one in the village dared to buy it. Later, when my dad was in the hospital, he mentioned this incident in passing. Then one of his roommates, a rich man, heard about it and said he was interested in buying it, not caring that it was a haunted house. So my mom took him to check it out. Before setting up, he called a monk to come with him, introducing the monk as his master. However, after they examined the house, both of them regretted it and fled. The monk said the house had very strong negative energy. First, the house was at the end of the road, making it a dead-end layout that trapped too much 煞气. Second, as we mentioned earlier, the in-house underground was draining the energy from the living. Third, the 2 wine cellars in front of the house were blocking the airflow, and combined with the dead-end layout, they would trap the sha qi inside. Fourth, the power pole in the middle of the yard was like a long spear piercing the house heart, which was extremely bad for the people living there. With all these problems, it's no surprise that something bad had happened there. I actually have some personal experience with dead-end roads. One time, while driving, I got lost and kept turning around. Eventually, I ended up at the corner of a neighborhood, and the road was blocked by a wall. Honestly, I was kind of freaked out. It felt like something unfinished had just been cut off suddenly, and it left me with this heavy feeling. Maybe that's why dead-end roads are such a big taboo. Anyway, I'll show you a picture so you can feel it for yourselves. So, do you get the feeling that something huge is out there watching you from a distance? Our county is located deep in Miaojiang. It is a place that's surrounded by big mountains, and hidden in those mountains are many Miao villages. Some are by rivers, some at the foot of mountains. But no matter what, they all have one thing in common. Every village has to have a guardian tree and a dragon vein. The guardian tree is easy to understand. It's usually an ancient tree of hundreds of years. The Miao people believe everything has a spirit, and ancient trees have powerful energy that can protect the area. So many people pray to these trees as their godmother. As for the dragon vein, it's a little more abstract. It's not something you can say, but it's the most important part of the village. The dragon vein is a mountain ridge selected by a Feng Shui master, though I don't know exactly how they choose it. All I know is that every Miao person views the dragon vein as the secret land of the village, and it's also a forbidden zone, having been protected for hundreds, even thousands of years. From this, you can guess that such a secret land would never be used for burying the dead. But the story I'm going to tell is about a family who dared to do just that, and it didn't end well for them. There was a family in our county, let's call them the Li family. Ever since the old man of the family, their patriarch, was around, they were known as the local bullies. Once the 3 sons grew up, they became even worse, and the whole family turned into notorious troublemakers. In the 1990s, the patriarch passed away. The 3 sons thought, since their dad was such an important figure, they should bury him in a place with good feng shui. So, they set their sights on the dragon vein. Of course, they didn't dare do this openly, knowing it would make people angry. Instead, they waited until nightfall and secretly carried their father to the highest peak of the mountain where the dragon head was. After that, the Li family started to prosper. Before, they were just small-time thugs, but after burying their father there, they experienced a huge rise in fortune. The eldest son, who had only a minor job before, was promoted to head of the department, and the next year, he became the county party secretary. The second son, who was just a butcher, suddenly got an opportunity and opened a factory. In just 1 year, he had become a millionaire. The third son, though, wasn't as imposing as his 2 brothers, also took over a market and quickly became its manager. But fortune is also a kind of energy, and once it all flowed to the Li family, it started to abandon the village. First, a few young men from the village were involved in a fight in the county, and 2 of them were killed on the spot. Then, a young man was executed for murder. Not long after, bird flu suddenly broke out, and a lot of livestock died or got slaughtered. Then, on the New Year's Eve, a huge fire broke out, burning down half the village and killing an elderly person. In short, all the misfortunes over the past 2 years happened in this village, standing in stark contrast to the peacefulness of the other villages. At that point, the villagers had to consider the reason behind it. Following tradition, they immediately called a Feng Shui master to check out. I don't know exactly what the master told them, but I heard that the villagers, extremely angry, marched straight up to the dragon vein peak and dug up the dragon head. Of course, they found the old man's body, but to their shock, it hadn't decayed at all. His face still looked lifelike, as if he had just passed away, and his muscles were still springy. When the villagers saw that, they understood everything. They were furious and threw the body off the mountain. The three sons, knowing they were in the wrong, didn't dare say anything. They secretly retrieved the body and reburied it elsewhere. After that, the Li family suddenly collapsed. First, the eldest son was arrested for corruption. Then, the second son died suddenly from illness, and no one could find his money. He'd apparently squandered it all. As for the third son, he lost his manager position, and before long, he was back to being a small-time thug. But since then, the village has been peaceful, and no more bad things have happened. I think maybe the dragon vein is probably similar to our ancestral graves. Its Feng Shui directly affects the prosperity of future generations. This reminds me of something that happened to me, personally. It was in 2023, At that time, everything at my work was going wrong, so I quit my job and went home to rest for a bit. One day, I was chatting with my cousin's sister, and she told me she knew a Feng Shui master who could tell fortunes. Maybe he could help me out. When we got there, I gave the master my birth details, and after looking at them for a while, he said, "You have a brother." I was like, "Huh? No, I don't. I am an only child. My family has an urban household registration, and since it was during the one-child policy, there's no way my parents could have two kids." But he was super sure and said, "No, you definitely have a brother. At least, you should have one." Then we told him it's just me and two cousins in our family, 3 girls. Then he understood and said, "Your parents probably had a son before, but he passed away unexpectedly. It is actually because of your great-grandfather's grave. There's a small creek in front of it, or maybe it's a small road. But whatever it is, the paths follow this kind of slope. High at one end, low at the other. This will result in your family not having any boys." Later, he added, "Even though no boys, your ancestral grave is in a great spot. It will ensure good financial standing and harmony for your future generations, so there's no need to worry." A long time later, I randomly mentioned this to my dad, and he asked what the Feng Shui master had said. So I casually brought up the part about the brother. My dad was really surprised. He said, "Yes, we did have a son. Back then, your mom caught a cold and took some medicine for it, but then she started vomiting. When I took her to the hospital, we were shocked to find out that she was pregnant. After thinking it through, we were worried the medicine would affect the baby, so we had to abort. It was exactly a boy." Later, I confirmed the location of the ancestral grave, and it was absolutely correct. So after this whole experience, I started to think that maybe life has some kind of outline, and some things are just destined to happen. Alright, that's all for today's video. If you like it, feel free to subscribe to my channel. The next video should also be about a spooky story, so don't miss it.